It is Abelor here with 1720 Faith, and today I am doing a recap of week 7 for our Faith Drop series. And this week we are in the area of discipline, and it's having faith in the little. And I just want to start off by saying thank you guys for those of you who have been joining me for the 12-week Faith Reset series. I put this series together literally actually 7 weeks ago, to give us a total of 12 weeks of increasing our faith, especially in times of stress, lack, want, need, just whatever you're going through. We need a bump up in our faith. So once again, thank you for joining me. For those of you who are new to me, I am Abelori. I am actually a board certified registered nurse, and I am a person who in the last 3 years has utilized God and the power of faith to get me through some of the most difficult things that happened in the last 2.5, almost 3 years of my life. And so today I am doing a recap of Luke 16:10, where it talks about faith in the little. Now, before we start, or before we start and before we get into just our centering scripture with it again, which is Luke 16:10, I'm going to go and I am going to actually give you a recap of what this particular parable is. And so I'm pulling it up now and we're going to go into it. When I'm doing my Bible study, I like to go over into Enduring Word and just kind of get a breakdown of either the book that I am in or the chapter and the chapter and the verse that I am in, just to kind of get a deeper understanding of what is going on. And so this particular parable, Luke 16:10, is about money and righteousness, and is talking about the dishonest steward. So for a recap, I'm going to just kind of give you a little, I guess, summary of what this parable is telling us. And so the summary is: a rich man had a steward, and I have my notes here. Side note, you guys, if you have not, I have a 12-week faith reset workbook that you can use throughout the 12 weeks of our journey. It is still available and it is for free. It doesn't cost nothing to download it and get it. And this is where I take my notes. This is where I do my Bible study lessons, just to kind of give me a breakdown of what was happening previously that led up to this particular parable passage, and just kind of again get a deeper understanding of what God is telling me, or what Jesus taught about. Rather, it's a parable that Jesus taught, so I want to make sure that I say the correct thing. And bear with me, you guys. It's getting kind of chilly. Had to turn on my air, so you may hear my air in the background. So as we look at this particular parable, Luke 16:10, I am going to go in, and what I was saying before I took a pause. Luke 16:10 is the story of the dishonest steward. A rich man's steward was being very dishonest, wasting and squandering. We're just wasting and squandering. And he wasted and he squandered. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. And his master came up to him and basically said that he was going to fire him because he was not doing what he was supposed to be doing. So as a result of him not doing what he was supposed to be doing, he was fired immediately. So in transition of him getting fired, he came up with a plan, because he know if he did not work, he would not have any money, and he would just lack. And so what he did was he reached out to the people who owed his master money, and he actually allowed them to settle for less than what they owed the master. Now keep in mind, He was already, the master came to him and basically called him out on his dishonesty and said, because you've been dishonest, you're now fired. So in transition of him getting fired, he decided to call up the people that owed his manager, his supervisor, his boss, if you want to put it in modern day times. And he basically said, hey, you owe my boss X amount of money. One of the stewards, I believe he owed, let me get it right. Let me pull it up because let me make sure. So he called up the people that owed his boss money. And in short, he said, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk to you and we're going to settle your account for less than what you owe. Now, his thinking in his mind was, if I give them a deal, then they're going to remember me once I get fired. So I'm going to have a leg up. When it's time for me to call on them, they are now indebted to me because I basically struck a deal with them. I brokered a deal with them. I said one of them he owed, and let me get this right. He owed, I believe, 100,000, and he settled for less than that. Okay, so here it is. He says one of his debtors said to him first, "How much do you owe my master?" And he said 100 measures of oil. I was correct. 100 measures of oil. So he said to him, take your bill and sit down and sit down quickly and write 50. So he allowed him to settle for half of what he owed. So instead of paying 100,000, he had him pay 50,000. So he said to the next man, he said, the next man, then he said to another, how much do you owe? So he said 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. And that's what the man did. So the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. So it kind of flipped, because instead of he was still fired no matter what. He was still leaving. But his boss basically said to him, I commend you for the dishonesty and for you going out there and being dishonest, because that was something that I don't want to say that was a brave thing to do, but you basically was watching your back, because after today you will no longer be working for me. So this man had reached out to the people that owed his boss, settled their accounts for less than what they owed, so that in the end they would owe him a favor. So when he's out, when he no longer has a job, he doesn't have money, he can call on them to collect by saying, hey, you remember when I brokered that deal where you did not have to pay my boss the full amount? Well, I'm kind of in a pickle and I just want to know, basically, since I scratched your back, can you now scratch mine? That's what he did. And his boss basically picked up on it and said, hey, I commend you for being dishonest and being shrewd, because you're looking out for yourself. You're looking out for your own interests. You're covering your behind because you're not going to have anything after you get fired. So, of course, we know he was not faithful for what he had and what he had and what he was doing with what he had. Even when we have little, we can still honor and be faithful to God. That is one of the side notes that I took out from this particular passage, is that a lot of times this falls under the connotation of when we need to tithe and when we need to give. And because some of us don't have much, or your paycheck is small that week, you decide, well, I don't have enough that I want to honor God by giving him, a significant amount. So I'm not going to give anything. What God is saying is, I know you. I know the position that you're in. I know that you may not always have it. He made us. He knows us. He knows that every day we're not going to be rolling in thousands of dollars. He knows it. But all he's saying to us is, Whether you have a little or whether you have a lot, be faithful and continue to honor me. So I'll use me as a prime example. I have been on a debt-free journey. I have been paying off debt from a divorce. I have been maintaining my home. That includes settling divorce debts, paying my bills in my home, and then also making sure that my son's tuition and he has books and all those things are being fulfilled. Now, there is absolutely some weeks where I may only have $50 left, or there's only some weeks where I may only have $40 left, and it may not be a pay week. But what I am going to do, I am still going to give my 10% of whatever I have in my pocket and then, live off the rest. Now, most oftentimes than not, I give my 10% from when I get paid and I have a larger chunk so that I am given the full amount. But there are some weeks where I absolutely have a few more bills that I need to pay that, I'm always saying to myself, and I'm going to be honest, God knows the position that I am in now. He is still going to cover me. He's still going to make sure that I have no matter if I have $5 left or $100 left. He's still going to provide measure and means for me. Why? Because I am still being faithful to him. I am still in my word. I am still thanking him. I am still honoring him with time and Bible study and prayer. So he knows that at the end of the day, I might not always have monetary measures to give. I might not always have monetary measures to have to be able to give him. But I'm still leaning on him, still trusting him, still getting in my word, still honoring him, even when I have little. And so Luke 16:10, one of the passages, 16:10 scripture states, faithful in the little. And that is a big thing for a lot of us. We feel like if we don't have enough of what we deem is going to be acceptable by God, then we just don't want to give. We don't want to be faithful. We don't. And for lack of other words, we're oftentimes embarrassed that we can't give our whole 10%. Sometimes we are embarrassed that at the end of the week, I only have $20 left. 10% of that is $2. But even that $2 makes a difference on me getting barely a half a tank of gas to a quarter of a tank, and I have to drive to and from work just on the little gas that I have. And so a lot of times we are just shamed because we have so little. And so when we are in times of lack, we don't feel like we need to be faithful to God, or we don't feel like being faithful is going to be honoring him because we can't give freely the way that we want to give. But again, Luke 16:10 reminds us to be faithful in the little. And again, there are going to be some days, there are going to be some times where absolutely 10% may really mean the difference between I can get to work safely for 3 days as opposed to 2 days. And then what am I going to do for day 3 if I don't have the money to get gas? In the grand scheme of things, it sounds selfish, but it is realistic. And especially in these days and times where everything is ridiculously high, we have the connotation that if we aren't able to freely give the way that we should, or the way that we feel like is honoring God, we just don't give. We just don't tithe. Or if you're not in a position to give, you feel like, why even thank God? Because I can't do my part. I can't honor him because I don't have it to give. So where is your faith in this point in time? You might not have the measures to give right then and there, but you still have the measure to be thankful, to be faithful, and to get in your word when it relates to God. God isn't saying, give me your last little bit. That's always why he says, give me 10%. But for some of us, 10% can be a lot. And so we equate that to being, at this point, why Why even say anything? Why get in my word? Why study? Why pray? Why ask God to bless me? Why ask God to forgive me of my sins when I can't show him how I truly feel because I can't give? And so again, Luke 16:10 reminds us to be faithful in the little. The faith insight that I have for you all tonight is God is working even when you cannot see it. See it. Trust him in this season. This may be your season of lack. I have been in a season of lack for the last 2.5, almost 3 years. You just barely scraping enough to get by because I don't want to dig into my savings. I don't want to pull money from my 401k and investments. I've literally had to manage off the money that I make between 3 jobs. I literally have honestly been working 6 days a week, sometimes 7, with maybe a day off in between before I go back and run it for another 5 or 6 days. But within that time, and even within the difficulties that I have had, I still honored God. Yes, there were times where I was very frustrated with him because I'm like, Lord, I just paid mortgage. I gotta buy groceries. I gotta be able to buy bath soap and I'm just asking you to give me something to at least allow me to get the bare minimum. And that is all I asked. And whatever the bare minimum was, I was thankful for it. There were weeks and days where I told my son, it's just the two of us. It's gonna be a tight week. We might have to do a couple of days of leftover repeats, or we're gonna have to do something that's in the budget. It may be 2 days of eating hot dogs and beans. It may be a day of just doing one pot spaghetti. Just to get us through for the week. And again, I didn't have much, but the provision that God allowed me to receive made way for me to be able to go to the market to get a little more than what I originally thought. There were times where I had paid my son's tuition, and he's like, "Ma, don't forget I got to get a book." And he's telling me the book is $180. Well, I'm looking at it like, dang, all I got is, I was holding on to this 200 for the week because I knew an emergency was going to happen. Something was going to happen. I just went on and said, let me go ahead and give him the whole 180. And lo and behold, he was like, Ma, since you just paid my tuition, we can go half on a book. If you could put the 80 to it, I'll put the other 80 to it. That was a provision that God provided for me. Me and him. He's still able to get his book, and I didn't have to give him the whole $180 because I had just paid his tuition. So again, God will make provision as long as we remain faithful when we don't have a lot, when we have little, or when we are in times of lack. He will make provision. So one of the questions I have for you is, what is God showing you? What is God showing you today about being faithful in times of lack? The other question is, where do you need to trust him more as it relates to if you're currently in a season of difficulty or in a season of lack? Where are you trusting him that he's going to fix it? He's going to make it right. And so for me, as I was reading this particular scripture, this chapter, this scripture, this verse, and I went through several videos with different people talking about this particular passage, what it meant. Pretty much it all summed up to the same thing, that the steward was just, I don't want to say corrupt, but he was honest. His manager found out about it, fired him, but in the interest of him getting fired, he had to come up with a backup plan because he knew he was going to be out. How many of us have also been in a position where we need a backup plan because we're like, hey, once we go through whatever we go through, spend what money we have to spend, we now have to start planning for a backup because we're now going to be in a situation where we're going to be lacked. We're not going to have a lot. So, what the main thing in this particular parable is, his manager praised him for being dishonest. He called him a shrewd guy. He was like, you literally had balls to do what you did, and I commend you for that. Because had it been anybody else, they probably would have never thought that deep. They probably wouldn't have never thought to use my customers as the people you're now going to go to when you don't have. So again, it is so many lessons and gems that you can get from this parable alone, but that was the main point of the parable, is that he was dishonest. Master found out, he was getting fired, or he got fired immediately, and he had to come up with a backup plan to cover himself, because he knew, once I'm out the door, I have nothing. So in journaling, I always say, we thank God for each and every day when we have a day of abundance, and the next day it may be a day or 2 days, 3 days, 4 days of lack. We still have to remain faithful in word, in thought, in deed when it comes to honoring God. And so faith action this week is, this week I trust God by. I will trust God by. Now that we're rounding out week 7, did you trust God this week? If you did not, then it's time to think about week 8. Week 8, that's a good question to start your study time with God. How are you going to trust God this week? What is going on in your world that you need to trust him this week coming up? And so our prayer for today is, Lord, help me trust you even when I don't understand. So that is it, you guys. Thank you for joining me in week 7, Luke 16, verse 10, faithful in the little. We are now rocking and rolling into week 8. If you have not gotten your free faith reset worksheets, please click the link in the bio. I will probably have it down in the show notes as well, where you can get your free copy of the worksheets. And we just use them to follow along throughout the last 5 weeks of this 12-week series. And again, we are rocking and rolling because we are headed into week 8. And again, if you have not had a chance to get your worksheets, please click the link in the show notes and in my bio, and it will be there. And let me show you guys. So this is what you will get. It's a printable. It's free. You can print it, punch holes in it, bind it, staple it together, glue the sheets together, because it'll be free for you to download. I just punched holes in mine and I stick them in a 3-ring binder. And so next week, in week 8, we will be talking about waiting. Woo, child, waiting. Wait for it. So just to give you, if you want to study in advance, we are going to be in Habakkuk 2 and 3. Wait for it. And we all know that saying. Write it down so that he who runs with it will tarry, but it will come to pass in its appointed time. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but that's pretty much what it sums up to. And so we will be talking about waiting, being in the wait. How can we patiently wait on the Lord? Because eventually he will answer you, and it will be 1,000 times better than what you were hoping to receive. So with that, I'll see you in the next video. And don't forget to download your free Faith Reset worksheets. If you have any questions, let me know. Please comment, share, subscribe, like, and bring somebody over who is having a difficult season and they need just a little boost in their faith and in their trust in God to help them get through this season. So until the next time, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.